G'day everybody and welcome to week 21 of Susies selections, brought to you by Sinclair Wilson.
Are you getting everything you deserve? At Sinclair Wilson, we can answer all of your financial questions, optimise your tax position and develop long-term strategies which will be very much to your advantage. Sinclair Wilson, for strength in numbers.
Well, they say a good footy tipping video is a short footy tipping video, so let's delve straight into this and see how quickly we can get it out of the way. To start things off, on Friday night in the AFL, we have Hawthorn versus Port Adelaide at Etihad Stadium. Last year I would have tipped Port Adelaide without even blinking, but obviously they've been pretty far off the mark this season and the Hawks are flying, so I'm tipping Hawthorn in this one. And then on Saturday we have Collingwood versus Richmond at the MCG. A top 4 spot is still in the offing for Richmond, but they really need to start winning now. This is a very winnable game for them, and I think they should do it pretty easily against the Pies. And then we have Greater Western Sydney versus Sydney in the Battle of the Bridge at Spotless Stadium. Sydney hasn't really been too flash lately, and Greater Western Sydney's best is pretty impressive. But just having to go off form here, I'm going to tip the Swans to get the win. But it'll be an interesting contest to see how it all unfolds. And then we have Gold Coast Suns versus Essendon at Metricon Stadium for the Twilight match. I'm going to do something a little bit foolish here. I'm going to tip Essendon. Clubs often seem to bounce back after a coach has been fired. It's a fresh start for the club and a fresh start for the players, and they're definitely capable of beating the Suns. So I'm tipping the Dons in this one. And then we have St Kilda versus Geelong at Etihad Stadium on Saturday night. Geelong wasn't quite up to the mark against Hawthorn last week, but they're still a pretty impressive side. I'm tipping them to get the win over the Saints because the Cats really need to win every game between here and the end of the season to keep their finals hopes alive. And then we have Adelaide versus Brisbane at Adelaide Oval. It was a pretty good win by Brisbane last week against an underwhelming Carlton side, but this is a different kettle of fish. I'm tipping Adelaide to get a pretty comfortable win over the Lions. And then on Sunday we have North Melbourne versus Fremantle at Etihad Stadium. This should be a pretty good contest and a close one as well, I reckon. But I don't see Fremantle dropping 2 games in a row, so I'm tipping the Dockers to get the win in this one. And then we have Carlton versus Melbourne at the MCG. Carlton is a bit of a shambles at the moment, so I'm tipping Melbourne to have a pretty comfortable win in what will be their 7th victory for the season. And then finally in the AFL we have West Coast versus Western Bulldogs at Subiaco. I'm really tempted to pick the Doggies for this one. I'm kind of gunning for them to get the flag this year. It'd be really lovely if they could. I reckon they'll give West Coast Eagles a good shake, but it's impossible to go past the Eagles after what they did to Fremantle last week, so Eagles for me in this one. Across to the Hampton League now, and to start things off we have Portland versus South Warrnambool at Helen Reserve. The Roosters had a really big win against Cobden last week and they'll be hitting this game with some pretty good form, so I'm tipping them to have another good victory over the Tigers. And then it's Port Fairy versus Cobden at Gardens Oval. Port Fairy knocked Warrnambool off last week, which is, I wouldn't say surprising. It was an upset win, but everyone knew they were in with a chance. I'm tipping them to carry their form into this game and have a good win over the hapless Bombers. And then we have Hamilton Kangaroos versus Koroit at Melville Oval. I'm tipping the Saints to try and keep their grasp on top spot of the ladder and have a good win over the Kangaroos here. And then we have Camperdown versus North Warrnambool Eagles at Lura Oval. The Eagles of course will be wanting to hit the finals with some good form behind them, so I'm tipping them to have a good win against Camperdown, which is struggling to run out games a little bit at the moment. And then we have Warrnambool versus Terang Mortlake at Reed Oval. Going for a bit of an upset in this one. I reckon the Bloods might just scrape across the line. They seem to think the Blues might be a little bit vulnerable at the moment with a lack of tall defenders. So it'll be a very interesting contest and a good test of Terang Mortlake's finals credentials. So let's see if the Bloods can get the job done. Well, that's it for another week everybody. Thanks very much for tuning in once again and happy tipping.